Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tronage, and today we're going to be talking about the Samguk series motors by DYS, and also we're going to be doing a little bit of motor theory, very basic stuff, but this way you guys can understand what are all these numbers and stuff mean on these motors. Stick around. Here's how this is going to work. We're going to kind of break this down into two parts. First, I really want to focus in on these Samguk series motors. I'm absolutely in love with them. I'm going to be completely honest. They're not the best motor in the world, but they're the best motor for the price because they're so cheap and so affordable that they're more obtainable by a lot of people. And I just like them because if you're doing a whole lot of builds, it can rack up the cost really fast if you're using expensive motors. So it's great to have maybe a luxury build that you're going to put some, expensive motors on, or if you have a lot of money at your disposal, then by all means, drop it. But, I don't have that much money floating around that I can just spend on a lot of motors, but I want to have a lot of different experimental builds, and these Samguk motors fit that bill. They're only 10 bucks a piece, which is a little bit over half the price of all the name brand high-end, the hype train motors and stuff like that. So it makes it really affordable because remember, you don't just need one, you need four. And if you're putting four in a quad and they're $10 a piece, that's 40 bucks just for the motors. If they're $25 each, that's $100 in motors. So $40 for motors, $100 for motors. Now, I'm not saying they're going to perform like those higher end motors. What I'm saying is for 10 bucks, they are awesome. All right, so here's what we're going to do. First, I'd like you to just see these because we're going to be talking about the Samguk series of motors. There's actually 3 different motors in the series, and they come in, they're called the Woo, the Wee, and the Shoe. And those names really designate the size of the motor, so we'll talk about that. And we're also going to talk about the KV of stuff. So what we'll do first is just so that you can understand what these numbers mean when I start unboxing these. Let's first just talk about what these numbers mean so that you guys can have a kind of gist of what you're looking at first and foremost. Rather than get really deep and really technical into all the ins and outs and formulas and explanations and stuff, I'm really just going to boil it down to very basic information that I feel is what's really most important for the vast majority of you guys to be able to digest, to understand it and just get the information into your head. If you want to get further and deeper, we can, that's another conversation for another day. So first, let's talk about the numbers that are printed on the can, on the bell, whatever you want to call that metal housing that a motor has. It has a series of numbers. Those numbers mean stuff. So let's talk about those first. For example, the Samguk motor that we're going to be looking at in a little bit comes in 3 sizes. It's the Woo, the Wee, and the Shoe. Okay. The Woo is the teal light blue colored one. The Wee is the darker blue colored one, and the Shoe is the red one. So it makes it very easy to understand which one you're looking at just by the color of the motor. But it also comes with some numbers after it. So let's first look at the Wee motor. Okay, the Wee motor, a 2207 motor. What this really, that 2207 is saying is that's how big the motor is. Physically the size of it. Now the one thing to keep in mind is there's not really a standard here because it could mean the size of the motor on the outside or the size of the motor on the inside. So just because it says a 2207 and you compare two 2207s, one may be a different size than the other because it's not really a standardized thing. It's, do you measure from the inside or do you measure from the outside? Now what's important about that is the bigger around a motor is, in theory, the more torque it'll have. And the way to think of that is if you've ever had to use, let's say, a wrench, and you had a wrench with a very short handle, and you try to turn a stuck bolt, it's difficult to do. But if you have one with a longer handle and you try to turn that bolt, it becomes easier. And that's because you're getting a mechanical advantage. If my fingers where I am here now are a bolt, and I go to move it like this, and I move it just a little bit, you can see I move a little bit, and it turns the bolt a little bit. But if I come all the way out here, I have to move it a lot, and I move the bolt the same amount. And in fact, you can see if I wiggle it here, you can see I move very little. This end is moving a lot. That's where your mechanical advantage is coming in, because I'm moving, let's say, twice the distance, my fingers, but I'm still turning that bolt the same amount. So because I'm moving twice as much, I'm getting twice as much torque. That's a very simple way to try to abbreviate understanding how this is working. Same thing with a motor, because the bigger around the motor gets, the further away you're applying that torque, and therefore it adds some torque to your props. So a bigger motor, wider, theoretically will have more torque on your props. So that's what that first number means. The second number, so the 07, the 2207, well, the 07 part is designating the height. The height of the motor is basically important because you're thinking about how much copper's in the motor, how big is the motor, and how tall is the motor. So part of it is about fitting it in your build, but part of it is also, again, very generalized. The bigger the motor is, the more power, the more speed that it will have. Then the Wii is available in 2 kVs. You have the 2300 kV and you have the 2600 kV. So what does a kV mean? So what kV stands for, it does not stand for, a lot of people think it may stand for like kilovolt or something. It actually is just a symbolic thing, meaning it stands for a constant regarding a volt. One thing that you need to understand about a motor is that very basically a motor, all it does is it's a converter. It converts mechanical energy into electrical energy. And it actually works both ways. If you have a motor here in the middle, like let's pretend my head is a motor, and you put electricity in on this side, then you'll get mechanical energy out on this side. And if you take a motor and you mechanically turn it, like with your hand or a crank or a turbine or whatever you want to turn it with, you turn a motor, then you get electricity out on the other side. And that's what a generator is. A generator, all a generator is a motor that's being turned mechanically and spits out electricity. And if you put electricity in, it turns and creates mechanical energy. That's all motors do. So what a kilovolt is it's how fast, how many RPMs, revolutions per minute, do you need to turn? Yeah, no, it looks like I'm saying I'm crazy now, because my head's still that motor. Remember the example? I'm not saying I'm crazy. Maybe I am a little bit. But as you turn this motor, how fast do you have to turn it to spit out 1 volt of electricity? And that's what a kV means. It's how fast do you have to spin the motor to generate 1 volt. And in theory and practice, since I said it works both ways, that would also mean if you applied 1 volt of electricity to the motor, how many RPMs would come out of the motor. That's kind of what a kV means. So now if you take a moment and let that digest. And let's say you have, let's make numbers very easy. And you have a 500 kV motor. And you hooked up a 10 volt battery to it. You would get 5,000 RPMs, which is 500 per volt, times 10 volts would be 5,000. So in theory, when you apply your LiPo pack to your quad, it has a certain voltage depending on how many cells it has and depending on whether it's charged or not or whatever, but you get the idea. That voltage applied to your motor will turn it at a certain rate. So now why would you want higher or lower kV motors? A lot of people think, oh, well, a lower kV motor is going to have more torque. Sort of. Not really. What a lower kV motor means is it takes 1 volt to spin it. So let's look at the Wii. You have a 2300 and you have a 2600. So that means with the same energy applied, one of them, let's say if you apply 1 volt, one will spin at 2300 RPM, one will spin at 2600 RPM. Now, it's not that the 2300 is going to have more torque, but it's going to be more happy under a more stressful load, if that makes more sense. Think of it like this. You're attaching a prop to the motor and you're asking it to spin. Let's say you put a very aggressive prop on your motor. All things equal, 2300, 2600, both have an aggressive prop on it. Is it going to be easier or harder to spin it fast? Obviously, it's going to be harder to spin it faster. So out of those two motors, the one trying to spin it at 26 and the one trying to spin it at 23, the one trying to spin it at 23 will have an easier time spinning that aggressive prop because it's spinning it slower. So it's easier to push it through the air because it's going a little bit slower. The harder you try to push it, the harder it is to get it through the air. Same thing goes for size and weight of your prop. Again, all things the same. If you have a bigger, heavier prop, is it easier to spin it slower or faster? The motor that's trying to spin a bigger, heavier prop slower will work a lot less. And the idea behind that is the 2300 will be happier with a little bit more of aggressive prop and a little bit heavier of a prop, with everything else being equal, because it's not going to try to work so hard to spin it up to where it needs to spin it up, essentially. So it'll sort of draw less power to spin it up. That's a very basic way to kind of understand things, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has more torque. Torque is going to come really from your motor size and how big around your motor is. It kind of acts like it has more torque because it's able to spin a bigger, heavier prop slower, which is sort of what you think of as being torque of a slower but more powerful spin. But that's not really what's going on, and I'm not going to get deep into it because you got to think about how many windings and whether they're multi-stranded or solid wire, and how many windings you have, and basically a lot of things can get lost into the resistance, and then that's why it's called a kV, because it's like a constant value. So as one goes up, then one goes down because it has to work out to be a constant. But the gist of it is, if you're going to be using a very aggressive prop or a big prop, you want a lower kV. If you're going to be using a not so aggressive prop or a lightweight, smaller prop, you want a higher kV. And that's why also, if you look at different sized craft, if you notice, the smaller the props get, all the way from like a tiny whoop type quad all the way up to like a 6-inch quad, the kV values of the motors as they get smaller get much higher because it's a tinier prop, so it needs to spin really fast to generate a lot of lift, so it has a higher kV. As you start getting bigger and broader props, they don't have to spin as much to get that same thrust, so they spin slower. So that's why bigger motors usually have a lower kV. Okay, so now we understand kV, and we understand the sizes that are labeled on the motors. Now, how does this all work into our hobby? Well, it really depends on taste. And what I mean by that is a racer wants a certain feel, a freestyle pilot wants a certain feel. Each person flying wants a certain feel. Some people like to fly a quad that feels very tight, very boom, you hit the gas and you're off. Other people want it a little, I don't want to say sluggish, but they just want it to be more like a big old boat Cadillac, where it's just like, yeah, I'm here and I got authority and I'm just kind of driving around and cruising. Others want like that monster truck feel where it's just got tons of raw. It's not going to go very fast, but wow, it's got some punch to it. So that's sort of what you need to think of when you're choosing motor and prop combinations of where you want to be in the spectrum. Also, as a side note, I am, you can check the card up here, I am in the process of putting together a series of videos that's going to be testing motor and prop combinations of their thrust, their efficiencies, and to help you guys make good choices as far as if I have this prop and I have this motor, what can I expect out of it? Or if you're choosing to buy things, you can say, all right, well, I would like to have this much thrust, and to get that, I can use this prop and this motor, and off we go. So I'll be doing extensive testing using a thrust stand from RC Benchmark and a combination of all the props and motors that I have. So go check that out and we'll get through this together. All right, so now that we've learned basically what a KV means and where it applies, and we sort of know what these motor sizes mean, now let's talk about these Samguk series motors. So I'll move over a little bit. So in the series, we have the Woo, the Wii, and the Shoe. So the Woo is the smallest motor of the series. It's a 2206. It's kind of like the entry level, if you will, sized motor. Kind of like the standard, I don't know. It's kind of like the general 2206 is kind of like the motor that you see everyone running, is sort of thing. And again, it just means it's 22 millimeters big, around, and it means that it's 6 millimeters tall. And it's available in a 2400 kV and a 2700 kV. And again, we mentioned if you're going to use bigger, more aggressive props, you'd want the lower kV. Or if you're using less aggressive, smaller props, you'd want the higher kV. The Wii motor is a 2207, and it's available in a 2300 kV, and it's available in a 2600 kV. So what's the difference between these two motors? Well, the difference is that the Wii is a little bit taller. It's about 1 millimeter taller. So because it's a little bit taller, it'll be a little bit more powerful because there's going to be more copper inside of it because it's the same size around, but it got taller. So think of it as a glass of water. You fit more water because it's taller. So because there's more copper in it, the motor itself will be more powerful. Then above the Wii, you have the Shoe, which is now a 2306 motor. So now if you noticed, we've dropped back down to the 6 millimeter size, height, but we've gotten bigger around. Being that it got bigger around, it means that it's going to have more torque, as we mentioned. And bigger around, also there'll be more copper in it because it's now a little bit bigger motor, because you can add copper making it bigger, or you can add copper making it taller. Both of those will have effects on the idea of things. So the Shoe is available in 3 kVs. It's available in a 2250, it's available in a 2500 kV, and a 2800 kV. Again, 2800, you're looking at like running a 4 or 5 inch prop and maybe a very low pitch, like a 50-40 if you're doing a 5-inch style, maybe even a 50-30, because you're spinning it so quick, you want a smaller prop and less aggressive. 2250, low kV, you're going to want a very aggressive prop, maybe a 6-inch prop, something to balance that out. I can't tell you specifically because I haven't run my tests on these yet, but like I mentioned in the earlier, there is going to be a video that I'm posting on that when I do my test results. But in general, that's what you can come to expect. So that's sort of where the spectrum is of these Samguk motors as far as what's available. Now, the easy way to think of it is the Woo is their least powerful, the Shoe is their most powerful, and the Wii is sort of like their mid-ground. Who are they good for? Again, that's really up to you and your preferences. I really like the shoe motors. I feel like they're great for freestyling. They're great for racing. I mean, one thing I like to maybe touch on is that I feel like everyone thinks that there's a very clean-cut divide. If you're a racer, you like this, and if you're a freestyler, you like that. But what about someone like me? I'm in the middle. I like racing, I like freestyle. I'm not necessarily good at either of them, but I enjoy them both, and I don't necessarily need to have a racing setup and a freestyle setup. You can take a racing quad and freestyle it, and you can take a freestyle quad and race with it. It's not like it won't work, it just may not be best and ideal. But if you're looking at a budget motor, you're probably only going to have one rig. So, you know, you got to fly what you'd like. And if you like to do both, then you want to have one that kind of does both. So I'm a big fan of the shoe motors. I feel like they're just beefy. They do everything you ask them to do. The Wii motors, on the other hand, I feel is a little bit better because they bring in the reins. Because I will say, the shoe motor, if you don't know what you're doing, it can get out of hand quick. It's like riding an unbroken horse. I've never ridden horses, by the way. I'm just going by what it seems like. But it can get crazy quick. Like, it's exhilarating, but at the same token, it's a lot of power to wrangle in. And when you're trying to do more precise things, I find myself very low on that throttle, so I'm not even using it to its full extent. The Wii motors, on the other hand, the dark blue ones, I feel are more universal. They're kind of like the Goldilocks. The teal ones, the Woo ones, I would say that would be maybe like an entry-level person would want those, just so that they can go full throttle and not have to worry about getting out of control. But I feel like you may want to upgrade at some point because they're just not going to have a lot of oomph. That's why I think the Wii is like sort of like that sweet spot. It's got qualities of the Wii where it flies good, but because it's a little bit taller, it's got qualities of the shoe because there's a little bit more copper in it, so it's a little bit more powerful, but not too powerful. Like, I feel like that's like a really good sweet spot for just general everyday flying. The shoes, I feel like, are a little bit more racy-ish feeling. You can go a lot faster, or if you want to do like a lot of like punchy, outy kind of freestyling moves where you're just like, boom, you're gone, then that's why I kind of like the shoe, because that's what I like to do. But anyway, so which is right for you? I don't know. You know that. I hope I've given you the tools to understand that. But now in addition to our education about motors in general, why don't I bring you in close? Because I have a Wii motor, and I have one of the shoe motors here. Unfortunately, I don't have a Woo motor because, like I said, it wasn't my really favorite. So I felt it was, I don't know. Maybe you like it. Personally, it was a little underpowered for me. I wanted to stick with the Wiis and the shoes. So why don't I bring you in close? We'll unbox them and take a look at them, and while we're at it, we'll talk about some of the parts about these motors also, so that just you have a little bit of education on that too. All right, so come on in, let's look at a motor close up.